In this episode of A Girl and a Gun, I talk with student and Generation Y filmmaker Jack Bullen. We talk about copyright, we talk about torrents, we talk about how to market your movie in the modern world. Coming up.
Girl and a Gun, episode 24, recorded on the 17th of the 10th, 2013, Return of the Jack.
All you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Hello, welcome to A Girl and a Gun, the show for filmmakers and content creators. I'm Phil Moore, and unlike usual, I am not joined by John Maisels this week. He's off doing a job, so I thought we'd have a special guest co-host today, Jack Bullen. G'day, Jack.
Hello.
Now, we had a cameo from you last week.
Yeah, but I had hair to here.
You had hair, and because when you were being our floor manager.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of news this week, and with John being away, I thought I'd take this chance to sit down and do that discussion properly. Because we had, you've got quite a few things that I want to talk about, in fact. That's worth having a chat. You being a representative, so to speak, of our Gen Y, yes?
Yeah, I've had quite a bit of experience in the sort of downloading and the torrent culture, and from my position, I see why it acts as such a threat, or poses such a threat to the sort of infrastructure in place for distribution in movies. But I also see the benefits, and I see a way forward, an evolution of it. And so it's not necessarily going to be big money for the people that sort of make it at the moment, but I think it's a more organic way to make films and quality control, because it's not a bunch of guys making the call. It now, the feedback that you're getting are from hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, let me go back. I want to go through this step by step. Okay. Let's start with, for those that may not understand, what is torrenting? What is the nature of piracy today for film and music?
Torrenting essentially is bringing, just say you have a file, just say it's A Girl and a Gun, and we have 10 people around the internet that have a copy of that file on their computers. What a torrent will do is take fragments from each of those 10 people and construct that file on your personal computer. So it's the people that have the file already are known as seeders, and the people that are taking it and downloading it are known as leechers. So within any kind of torrent site, if you see a file or a movie or a Girl and a Gun episode that you may want, you'll see two numbers, or you'll see a few numbers, but the ones that matter are seeders and leechers. And that is sort of how fast you're going to get a file and how reliable that download will be.
Right, so depending on if it's a popular movie, and you'll see how many people are seeding this movie currently, which might be thousands or hundreds, potentially.
At the moment, one of the biggest files that I've seen is Grand Theft Auto 5, and that generally has about 10,000 people at any one time on Pirate Bay and more.
Right, and so all around the world, there are people out there offering segments of this file,
What'll happen is once you've downloaded it, the progress bar will stop and it will turn to seeding. So now you have all of a sudden the file that you've collected from the net, from all of those different seeders from out there.
So as soon as you've got the whole thing, you can become a seeder. So what's the difference between a seeder and a leecher?
A leecher is someone in the process of downloading the file. A seeder is a person that has the particular torrent file that organises the data coming in from all around the world. That turns it, you go from a leecher to a seeder. You turn into someone that is actively supplying that file all around the world.
Now partaking in sharing it with everyone else.
And so that's peer-to-peer file sharing.
Yes, exactly. So this is peer-to-peer sharing. This is not what Napster was, not what or Kazaa or some of those older formats were.
I'm not quite sure, but I think the difference is that this is file sharing as opposed to it being taken from a particular place.
Exactly. There's no central resource of this.
So the idea is that I give up some of my information, be it music, and then take some of the information, be it film, and there's an exchange going on.
Yeah, and you're getting bits and pieces from all over the world potentially, until you get the whole file put together.
Especially on the big sites, like the one everyone knows is just Pirate Bay. It's had documentaries made about it. That is based out of different service centres spread out all over the world to try and keep them operational if one government comes down on top of them.
So for those that don't understand, there might be a central website that's sort of where you start from.
A shopfront or something.
Yeah, which gives you the basic torrent file, which is quite tiny.
Yeah.
The link for the file, but the file itself that you're after is spread all over the place, basically, yeah.
Indeed.
So that's how torrents work, and this is now the nature of modern piracy. If you want a modern movie, if you want a modern, or any movie, or music piece, or game, as you say, you can usually find anything, certainly anything that's recent and popular, on these sites. Yep.
Do you remember when Wolverine came out and it was that before
It was even pre-release, yeah.
pre-release? So that would have come out. One person would have put that online, and then it would have been downloaded by a whole bunch of people. And so in the space of time that it took them to download it, just say it took them 2 hours to get, in 2 hours' time, there's now 10 people seeing it, which means there are 10 different sources, which means the file will download.
And it just grows and grows and grows. And this becomes the next question then, where do the files come from in the first place?
Well, that was leaked from one of the studios, I believe, that Wolverine copy. Other than that, there are specific suffixes on the end of the torrent sites that you'll see. There will be a web rip, which is usually a DVD release from another country, then you'll have subtitles on the bottom that you can't get rid of. So they might be in Mandarin or they might be in Russian. R5 copies are all from Russia. So what they do is they will take a video, hang on, let me think. They take a video camera into a cinema and they jack in the for deaf people audio jacks in the side and take
get the audio
sound
from that.
So you're not taking in the speakers and the people eating. You have very good quality sound.
Yeah.
And average picture.
So you can get from a gold release, a pre-release of the film, or even before it's finished. I mean, the Wolverine one came from allegedly one of the post-production visual houses, visual effects houses.
And you can see the difference. There are you can see green screens.
Yes, so it wasn't even the finished film. You can get it ripped directly off a DVD Blu-ray once they come out. Or as you say, people literally filming it in the cinema sometimes. Yeah.
And these are all based along a timeline. So just say Our Girl and a Gun is in pre-production where it was released in Wolverine. That was an absolute fluke. We haven't seen very many of those within sort of torrent sites for a long time. And then you'll get cam jobs, which is people turning up and filming it
which is pretty bad quality, I must say. It's awful.
Any movie that you would want to watch, you just bypass those. They come out very quickly. You know the quality is terrible. You know.
So by way of saying all this, I'm not advocating you should be doing this. We're just explaining the process. So that's how the torrents work, and it's become a big issue because there are so many films, so many music, and music is easy to rip. CDs do not have copy protection. You can just rip them straight away and put them on the web. DVDs, Blu-rays, they have a form of copy protection, region and encoding, but that's easily circumvented.
Yeah.
So it's not that doesn't really work. The studios attempt at copy protection for these sorts of things. And of course now there's video on demand and there's Netflix, etc., where you can easily just capture the stream, basically. So this is where it comes from, and this is how it's being distributed. But this is what's really changing the model for distribution for film and music, because if everyone is downloading a free version of a multi-million-dollar film, like something like Wolverine, $100 million film, how is the studio going to make their money back if people are just ripping it off?
In that case, you're probably not. But I can tell you from my the people that I know and the way that I view movies, if there is a movie that's coming out that I am very much looking forward to, there is a tangible difference between you watching it on your little computer screen and you watching it in a Cinemax movie theatre. So the stuff that I'm really keen to see, I'll go out and I'll pay my money and I'll sit there and have my choc top and watch it in the cinema and enjoy it in that way, because some movies are meant to be that way. But if those are the top 10% of the movies that I would want to see in a year, the rest of it, I might only watch 10 minutes of it and realise that it's one of those movies that you're glad that you never paid money to go and watch.
So, I mean, this is one of the arguments from people that do download stuff off Tomlinson, etc. I'm not paying for it, but I'm just sampling it. And if I really do like it, I'll go and buy it. Or I'll go and see it in the cinema. Or I'll get the DVD when it's released, if it's a really good film. And one of the stories we had, I think, was last week or the week before, we talked about Man from Earth, which is a little indie sci-fi film which was released onto torrents, found a big audience on the torrents, and basically more people saw it that way than would ever have seen it. Hence, they're now thinking about making a sequel, which would never have happened otherwise.
No, because there's a grassroots surge of popularity for work that is of a particular quality. I remember hearing a statistic that, I don't know, you would probably have a much better idea than I would, that the Hollywood studios will make X amount of films, be it 6 or 10, and it's the one that happens to make money which funds the next batch of movies. That in itself, you can't ever expect people to go and pay money at the cinema, $25 a ticket, for those 6 movies that they don't care about. And there's that one that makes them back money. That seems to me as an inherently flawed system of making movies.
And it is inherently flawed, but it's also because you never know what's going to work.
No.
So they diversify. They don't put all their eggs in the one basket. So they'll make, and nowadays we're making big budget comic book films a lot. So we're talking $200, $250, $300 million budgets or more, right, for some of these films. If they don't work, they're relying on something else to try and pick up that loss. And if a couple of those, if 3 of those big films in a year fail, the studio's in serious trouble financially. And if one of those films, like say an Avengers, which did do well at the box office, but I'm sure it was also very popular on the torrents. You know, they would have
Yeah.
lost a lot of money they claim they would otherwise have got because it was a very popular film for pirating.
But usually, with Wolverine being an exception, usually anyone that wants to see a movie in 720p quality or 1080p quality has to wait to around about the time that the DVD
And
releases.
this is the old model that you're talking about. The old model was release it in the cinema, it'll have a few months run, at least 3 months in the cinema, and then we'll release it for aeroplanes, then we'll release it for cable, subscription television, and then DVD release and Blu-ray, and then a year later we get to free-to-air TV and things like that. So there are these, what they call windows of opportunity, windows of release, which are spread out over a year or more. That has now collapsed completely because the audience says, I want to see it now, and I'm not going to wait for the DVD release.
But what I'm saying with the torrents is that a file of a particular quality isn't available to those people supplying it on these torrent sites until a copy of it slips through the cracks
Until it's released
in one
on
of these
DVD.
windows as it comes along.
Right.
So for me, for the Avengers, I was really keen to see the Avengers. You know, I'm an old comic book fan from way back. And so when it came out at the cinema, I was there in line a couple of days after it turned out because that's the experience I want. I want to sit with a screen the size of my house, and I want to sit there and be there with my friends. There's a different experience.
So what kind of films, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but what kind of films would you simply wait until they were available on a torrent rather than go and see them in the cinema?
Classic example of something that I got a week ago, The Internship with what's his name, Owen Wilson, and the other guy from The Wedding Crashers.
Right.
And I watched about 20 minutes of that, and it was not of any quality. I would have never paid money to see it. And then it just sits there on my computer, and I might watch 20 minutes here, I might watch 20 minutes there. But to me, that does not represent a quality product in which I'm willing to pay money for.
I remember way back in the early days of cinema, and this is when the movie houses owned the cinemas in America, and people were getting into this business because they thought, this is great. People buy a product, the ticket for the movie, without even knowing what it is. And they go in, and if they don't like it, we don't have to give them their money back.
Because they walk out.
Because they walk out and they've seen the movie, they pay for the ticket. It's not like buying an apple that's rotten and you have to return it and get your money back. And this was the old model. You buy your ticket
But is that
and you
not
just
the
take
current
your risk.
model as well? Is that not the current model as well?
And that is the current model. You buy your ticket, you buy the DVD, and unless it comes highly recommended, unless there's reviews which you trust, and this is why there are star actors and star directors. I trust that director.
Yeah.
Anything this actor is good generally is good. And this is what helps sell the movie, and that's what brings them to the cinema.
Anything that Daniel Day-Lewis is in, I will go to the cinema. I don't care what cinema it is, because that man puts me in seats.
Right. So this is what started the star system. People will go and see movies with certain people in them, or because a director like Alfred Hitchcock in his day and things like this, we trust them to make a good film. I like the kind of films that these guys make. That's getting more and more difficult now.
Well, it's also, there's such an epic dilution of quality within movies and media that are created.
There's also
so much stuff that is...
there are these great big tentpole films, and then there's the indie film for a couple of $1 million or thereabouts. But there's not much in the middle. There's never been profit in the middle area. So we're talking 10, 20, $30 million.
Like Sharknado in the middle there.
Sharknado did well. Oh, Sharknado did very well. That was low budget. That was seriously low budget. Anyway, but I want to move on actually, because we're talking about how do we fix this? If this model is falling apart, what's the solution? How do we get a model where the filmmakers and the studios representing them can make their money and continue to make films, and the audience is content with paying what they are prepared to pay for it. Without pirating too much.
The example I touched upon last week was Louis C.K., the comedian. Louis C.K. is a very well-established comedian. He's recognised as one of the guys that doesn't sit on material for a year. He doesn't do, a year's worth of shows telling the same jokes. He does a DVD release or a couple of shows, and he goes back home and he writes jokes. He just punches them out like a factory, and then in 6 months he's got a completely new show. He doesn't repeat any material, and that work ethic in itself builds a brand around Louis C.K. So when it came time for him to put a show together and put his show on the air, he shirked all of the usual methods for putting a show together, producers and directors and all that sort of stuff. He said, "You give me money, I'll deliver you an episode." So he edits all of it.
He became a totally indie producer, basically. Yeah.
He wrote everything that he did. He got the guys that he wants to work with. He edited it all on his little MacBook Pro at home, and then turns up to the studio one day and it's like, "Here's Ep 4."
Right.
And based upon that, he got more of a following because the quality of the show that he was turning out, it was different from a lot of other
So
television.
how is it being sold?
Well, that has gone through normal, I think it's HBO or Comedy Central. No, it'd probably be Comedy Central, I would assume. I'm not sure.
But I think he's also released it on iTunes or whatever, or through his website directly, hasn't he? Yeah.
But then based upon the momentum of that, he said, okay, so I can do things a little bit differently. So for his next DVD release, instead of going to one of the big distribution centers, going to HBO and paying to have his piece broadcast, he recorded it all, took the footage home, cut it all up himself, created a file, put it on his own website, so
Right.
there are no middlemen taking any kind of level of profit. And he said, guys, to his audience, $5. If you want my new thing, just my new performance, $5. You send it to my PayPal account or whatever it is, and you can download the
And
file
he's just
from my
offering a
site.
file.
Yeah, and he made $20 million in 24 hours.
Right. Now, is this because that just seems like a great deal and he's got a big audience to,
Well,
that are into
I
him?
think it's indicative of the fact that he's not including all of the...
And he's cut out all those middlemen.
He's cut out all the middlemen. He has the bare minimum of overheads and can afford to trust his audience and his own brand and popularity and his confidence in the material that he's got.
So he's going direct to his audience, basically.
Exactly.
And the example that I've got, and we've got the website for Louis C.K., and there's also a website up there for Kevin Smith. The example most recently from him, who's the filmmaker of Clerks and other films done traditionally, the old-fashioned way through studios. But more recently, the last film he released called Red State, which is a horror film, unusual for him, he basically toured. This is like the old-fashioned way of doing it, where he would go to a cinema and you would pay $40 or whatever it was for a ticket, a premium ticket. You'd see the film, and then you'd have Kevin Smith he's a great public speaker, and you'd do a Q&A after every single session. And they would tour with the film around the country. It took about 6 months or something.
That is value.
It becomes a special event.
And you
And he released it independently.
And Kevin Smith's demographic would be predominantly these people that are of the age that are within that sort of sphere of people that are downloading things and torrenting and doing all the stuff that we're talking about. And I couldn't imagine a single one of those guys that have loved Clerks or loved Chasing Amy or Mallrats or any of those that wouldn't want to be in a room with him, watch his latest work and then have a chat about it. That's value adding. That's what the studios are failing to do.
And this is why, and he's very big on self-marketing, self-promotion. He's got his own podcast network now, and that's becoming his new career.
That's great.
But this is an example of you've got to become the brand.
Yeah.
You, the personality, now have to become the brand. You can't just leave that up to the record company, the movie studio.
Because they get it wrong all the time. Look at Miley Cyrus.
And for people like Louis C.K., for people like Kevin Smith, they can become the brand. And certain musical artists, like Miley Cyrus, admittedly, she's whatever she's been up to lately, it's certainly raising her profile.
I bet that wasn't her decision. I reckon there would have been a room of people that told her, you're going for a new demographic now, this is how you have to be. And she's stuck with the decision that a room full of older people told her to.
And this is the breaking down of this system where the studio or the record company was in control of the release, and here's the product, you buy it, kind of thing. I mean, my own son's band has done this, and he has told me that as a reasonably successful rock band in America, they don't make their money off CD sales. They don't make their money off iTunes, though they're doing okay on that. They make their money off touring and merchandise. And any young band these days, if you can't perform live, you don't have a career basically.
No.
You've got to be able to do it live.
Unless you can-
You've got to. People
in
will
a-
go to the events. So again, this goes right back to the really old days of movies and music, where people would buy the sheet music for themselves, then they'd sing it around the piano. Or you go and see it at the vaudeville, at the music hall or something like this. It becomes an event. It's just something that you go out and see. There was no such thing as recorded music. It now becomes a case where the artist has got control again if they choose to take control. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's, and I agree, that's where the model needs to go. But there are some artists that doesn't work for. It doesn't suit.
No, but I think concentrating on one person downloading the latest U2 album or whatever it is, that's one way of looking at it in that particular instance. But I don't think that it shows you the behavioural patterns of what that person's doing. That person's not just downloading that album. They're downloading 20 different bands that sound kind of like that one album. And then from all of those, they might find their absolute favourites. And so you have these fringe bands that are sort of known within the same sort of circles that would never get the popularity because they're drowned out by the particular marketing strategies of the musical studios. They give preference to the people they think they're going to make the most money. And this demographic of people respond to that. So finding those fringe artists, there's a feeling of discovery that comes from that. And when they're playing in your town, you go and see them. And we were talking to one of the other students who, in the back when we were setting up here, about a friend of his, I believe, or maybe it was his auntie or something like that, had done a PhD looking at this sort of culture. And she says that the people that download music are more likely to buy merchandise and they're more likely to go
Exactly.
and see that.
So the music itself now becomes a loss leader, effectively.
Well,
You're being forced to give away the product, and you make it on the back end with the merch and the touring and other ancillary things.
But I think it's also testament to a good artist. I mean, well, you create art, and yeah, absolutely, you need to make a living of it. Everyone needs to eat and a roof over their heads. But if you're sitting in front of an auto-tune machine and punching out a record that is then marketed to a particular level, so it gets a particular amount of sales and turns platinum and then gets a particular amount of sales, and then you turn up and can't perform on a stage, that's not an artist, that's a construct.
For music, that's not... I mean, music is sort of getting used to that idea now. And if they're a good band and they can do it live, they can work it. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to make an album these days, right? But it costs a lot of money to make a movie.
It does.
You put a lot of money into making a movie. Even a low-budget indie film can still be $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, which is a lot of money for a low-budget maker. If everyone pirates your film, how are you going to have any chance of making a living at this?
Well, that's a good point.
You can't go around and just tour your film like Kevin Smith did. You don't have the audience yet.
But you also are establishing a brand for yourself, and the people that are downloading movies are also the people that would want to support the stuff that they like more than you would traditionally. So then you have this concept of crowdsourcing. So to say you make a movie that gets downloaded more than it's watched at the cinema, for your next project, people are looking out for Film More. They want to know what he's doing next.
I hope
and
so.
If you appeal to these people and you say, hey, I understand, I can see the numbers of how many times my film's been downloaded and we made X amount of money. It's tough to make a movie here. So I need you guys. Can you give us a hand? Can you give us maybe $10 if you could? Anyone that likes my last movie, if you give us $10, we can make another one.
Well, now we're talking crowdsourcing, and there's 3 sites in particular, and we've got them there, which is Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and in Australia there's one called Possible. So these are the 3, and there are others, but they're the 3 main crowdsourcing sites. Crowdsourcing has become a bit of a legal issue and a tax issue, but I won't go into that today.
That's curious, I hadn't heard about that.
Well, in terms of if you raise a certain amount of capital, it becomes an investment. How do we deal with the tax and that there should be a proper legally written prospectus and things like this. But basically you're asking for donations. You're not asking for investors. Yes, Kickstarter type projects have worked very effectively for certain tech products, certain musical artists, even certain filmmakers. But they've got to have that audience to start with. They've got to have thousands of people that will say, yes, I'll kick $10 in, $100 in to raise the budget that you're asking for to get this film made. Or it might be part of the budget. And there are examples of films that have been done that way. Iron Sky, part of that was funded through crowdsourcing of that kind.
Snakes on a Plane was basically written by fans.
It was, yes.
So
They-
if you marketed it that way, if you said anyone that's willing to suggest how this scene happens, give us $20.
So they
and
had
we'll take your
input from,
ideas.
exactly. So, but to raise, that's low budget stuff though. We're still talking at the most a couple of $1 million really. I think 5 million is like the most that a film's sort of been able to raise on those
But
sort of
then
things.
once you get the momentum from a popularity and a base, your own base and your own brand, the Fillmore brand, does that not make you more attractive to someone who's willing to commit larger amounts of money?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, how do I make that brand so that people will invest? I mean, I've done a couple of movies, for example. I don't want to use myself as an example here, but I still am not nearly well known enough to raise a couple of $1 million on Kickstarter, I would suggest.
No, but it depends what your project is. Depends if there is a market that goes beyond your brand. So, for instance,
Okay, here, now we come down to it. How does one market oneself in this new model, in this new brave new frontier that we're going into?
there was an idea, there was a concept of I'm not going to name any names because I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say, but there was a film based around the journey of a particular ethnicity within Australia about how these people have come from the country that they came from. And it's a story that hasn't been told, and it's a story that is close to the hearts of everyone from the particular ethnicity within that country, within this country, be it the people that actually migrated, their children, their children's children. Their traditional culture is still strong enough to identify themselves with, but now they have this place in this land. If you find someone that represents that community in some way and use that, this is our story and it hasn't been told, and we have faith in this guy to be able to do it. We should have, why don't we have our
In
story
fact, I'll
told?
give you a good example of that kind of thing. Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
He went to Christian evangelical churches and said, I'm making a movie about Jesus. Invest in my film.
Yeah.
I'm Mel Gibson. You know, and because no studio would invest in it. He was going to do it in an ancient foreign language, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Most of the funding for that came through Christian churches, Republican-style churches in America that wanted to see the film made.
So we have precedents like that. I'm not saying that I have all
And the same is true for biker films. For any film that's got a genre and there's a hardcore audience that would want to see a film like that, you go to that directly to audience. That's not new, absolutely. But the method of approaching them can be new now, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can pitch directly to them. Social media allows you to weasel your way into and get trusted messages from people within their circles and their communities to say, hey, I found this the other day. What do you think about it? And it might just be a 3-minute piece where you are directly told what this story is about and directly given viable reasons about why it wouldn't be funded in the traditional ways, but it's still important to this particular group of people. Still should be made. And I think that there's a very good chance that this film would be made because the money's there. The money's there and no one's asked for it yet.
Right, so, okay, let's say you get money through crowdsourcing. You manage to fund your film. You manage to make your film. How do we now market this? How do we now get this out there? And in fact, it's flipped it on its head. You basically get all your money up front, your budget, you've made your film, and you say, that's it, I'm now, and most people do this, I'm now making this available to the people that invested, to the audience that have already pre-bought this effectively.
Well,
I'm not looking to make money off this, we've already done it. Yeah, that's how some people approach it.
But then you also have, for using this particular example with the migration of a certain country to here, that has now become a cultural thing as well, and it's an identifiable thing within this community. So why don't you say, on its release date, we're not going to have it at a cinema. We're going to have it at the open air cinema down at Lady Macquarie's Chair or wherever it is, and it's going to be a food festival, and we're going to have traditional dances and culture, and it's going to be a celebration of who we are, culminating in this movie. So now you have all of these different elements of that community coming down, making money, networking. There's benefits that go beyond just the movie.
So beyond that big cultural premiere, is there a life for this movie? Is it worth? You make the DVD and you can sell them on the spot. You can do that. That goes way back, selling it out of the boot of the car, basically.
Yeah.
This is fine for little projects, for lower budget projects, but How is anyone going to make anything with a decent budget these days?
Well, value adding. So you make it so that the DVD extras are something that you go out and pay for, that the movie is something that is more readily available. But what you don't have is 2 hours of how the movie's made, or 3 hours of interviews with the cast, or you sit down the creator of it and you talk to him about where the story came from. There is so much footage and media available within the production of the movie that fans are fascinated in. If you sat down with Spike Lee for the whatever,
And he's
Spike
trying to
Lee.
get one up on Kickstarter as well at the moment,
Spike
wasn't
Lee?
he?
No, I'm thinking of Stanley.
Stanley.
Spike Lee. Yeah, that's similar. The latest Spider-Man movie that comes out. So that's one of the movies that is a cinematic experience. You're probably going to get a lot of people there. Probably not going to sell a lot of DVDs because there's that file that comes out, and that's a particular sort of age bracket where people will probably download the file. But to me, I'll buy the DVD in a heartbeat if it's got a 2-hour interview with Stan Lee about,
I will
Spider-Man.
very often buy the Blu-rays just for the commentary tracks and things
the
like
commentary.
that.
There's a perfect example. It's something that I
Which
miss.
is easy to make.
One of my favourite pieces of media of all time is the original Band of Brothers season, and the extras disc are fascinating. They have documentaries.
But see,
about all
we're
the guys.
filmmakers. We're into that stuff. A lot of the regular audience don't care about that stuff. They just want to see the movie. They just want to get the file.
Yeah.
But I agree. All of those ancillary things, they do add to what you can sell. If it's only 10% of your market, that's still 10% of your market that you could sell. I get that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also it drives a deeper involvement in what you're seeing in the movie, the product itself, and I think that has value that hasn't been tapped properly yet. If you release a movie and nothing else on a DVD and charge $30 for it after someone's paid $30 at the cinema.
Well, the other example, we need to wrap this up, but I just want to finish with this. Last year there was a film, or was it 2 years ago now, an Australian film called The Tunnel. And they had a deal, I think it was with Sony, for cinema release, but they also released it at the same time on Foxtel, same day. They had their premiere down at Bondi and on DVD. So all those windows that we talked about at the beginning of this talk collapsed into one day, basically. Cinema, DVD, premiere, and torrent. They released it on torrent on purpose. So it was not an illegal download because they chose to release it on torrent. They said, get the torrent if you want, buy the DVD, watch it on Foxtel if you're a subscriber.
Come down to the cinema.
It's everywhere that you might want to see it, or go and see it in the cinema.
How did it go?
Well, it was a great experiment. I don't know if they've made a profit out of it, but I think it was good promotion at the time.
Yeah.
To release the film on
It's
torrent.
thinking laterally. It's
Some
thinking
people
outside
choose
the
to
box.
do that. Some bands choose to do that. Not everything on torrent is illegal after all.
No.
Some people deliberately choose to release it on torrent and say, take it, that's fine. This is promotion for me. This is marketing.
I think the bottom line of what I'm trying to say is that the technology is available and it evolves faster than people can control it. And so now it's up to the major studios to either go along with it, work a way around it, or provide content, anything to the audience that they can't get from these illegal ways to download.
Well, the big stumbling block, honestly, and the studios are part of this, is the legal and political side of copyright law, which is way behind the 8 ball. Copyright law was really important over 100 years ago when it first came in, right? Everything we do nowadays is a copy. And if you look at Larry Lessig's talk on the TED conferences, he talks in depth about this. And we're not going to go there now, but that's what ultimately needs to change. Everyone's trying to protect copyright so that the artists get fair recompense for their work. And it's all built around copyright law currently. To my point of view, copyright law isn't relevant anymore. So what's going to replace it? How do we guarantee an artist an income? If everything can be downloaded and pirated, do we simply say, don't worry about making money off your music, off your movies, off the product, make it off all these ancillary things? But that's a whole different approach, and some artists it suits, some artists it doesn't. People are scrambling for this, and I know we could keep on going, but we've got to wrap this up. I don't think we've actually found any answers, but it's certainly been a really good discussion. Yeah. Anything you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to leave us with?
I'm sure horse dealers were pissed off when the car came along, but now we have this world. for better or worse, they had to evolve or find another business.
Same was true when the steam engine came along. Same was true when television came along, and radio
So
came along.
To sit here and say that it's a great injustice going on, I believe that it's just an evolution.
It is a revolution in how content, how creative artists get their stuff out there and how it gets seen. It will change, but it might take a couple more decades before we actually work out, oh, this is how it's meant to work now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're in a very
Until then, go to the cinema and see the movies that you want to see, and go and see the bands that you want to see, because
What's the last film you saw in the cinema?
I'm going to see Gravity.
I'm going next week, in fact,
Yeah,
too. That's
IMAX. I'll go to
That's
IMAX,
one of those
sit
films
there
that
with
you've got to
glasses.
see in the cinema.
Exactly. You don't get the same experience
Yeah.
sitting at home.
Thank you very much, Jack, for that. Very in-depth discussion. If you guys out there have any thoughts on this, email us, veronica@agirlandagun.tv, if you want to buy into this argument. What is your take on this? If you are a filmmaker, if you're a music content creator or games maker, how do you feel about your stuff being pirated? How do you feel as someone who might actually occasionally use a torrent site? Let us know what you think. So email us at that address. Meanwhile, thank you very much, Jack. And for now, guys, that's a wrap.
All you need to make a movie is a gun and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Girl on a Gun, episode 24, recorded on the 17th of the 10th, 2013, Return of the Jack.
Can we do that again without moving the camera, please? Sorry.